it's the pain and hurt that I'm suffering more than the breakup more, and he isn't. Ah, yes, 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 Erica, yes. Um, and I know you mentioned, you're in therapy and things like that. Um, and so I know that you're, potentially in some good hands to really process some of that for sure. And I think it's a part of the ebbs and flows. I'm suffering more from the breakup than he is. And I want you to consider this too, right? Because that's some of the belief, especially behind transitions of relationships. Like, it's unfair that you're feeling more of the weight, more of the pain than he is. And honestly, I think there's a lot of that we're looking at, and that's an assumption. That's more of a story that we're creating because, maybe we aren't able to see them move in various different pains. Doesn't look like they're hurt. Maybe they're already in relationships, whatever the other case is. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in front of people and, in the midst of the hurt and pain that they're experiencing, part of what is in, adding additional suffering is the belief that the person isn't hurting as much as they are, which then leads them to believe that they ever love me as much as I love them, care for me as much as I care for them, those kinds of things. And sometimes that's an assumption made because of what we're seeing and how we're seeing them move externally. But just because they moved on, or not even moved on, just because they're dating someone else, or they're not crying, or they're not posting about it, or anything like that, it doesn't necessarily mean um, his MO is to go to sleep with women immediately. It's like, yeah, and that's what hurts too, right? So there's a variety of things, right? But I want you to yeah, and I want you to consider this too. Like it's not so much that maybe he's not hurting, because let's think about it. Like, Erica, for real, like, let's think about it. A healed man, all right, is not necessarily gonna move with the aspect of, you know, carrying an MO to sleep with women immediately. That's not a healed mindset. So if it's not a healed mindset, we already know that that's a hurting mindset, right? That's a limiting belief. That is a man who's wounded too. And his way of expressing that may not necessarily be through the emotional aspect of things as much as it is numbing those emotions by sleeping with other women and moving around and making that his MO. That is a hurting man, right? And so he's hurting. It's just not being expressed in the same way. And I think that's one of the things that we have to be mindful of. And they may never admit that, right? They may never admit that they're hurting, but that doesn't mean they're not. We know plenty of people who are good at posting on social media, good at looking good for the camera on social media. And then when they put that phone down, not only do they despise the person that they just posted a picture with, that they did for all the fans, that they did for all their followers and all the things, but they're crying, they're in pain, and there's a lot of different things that are happening there. And so we want to be mindful of just kind of catching some of that, right? And also too, not trying to live in the other person's head, trying to figure out why they aren't feeling the way that we are. Because I think some of the hurt is also due to just how badly and deeply you wanted to love, you wanted to express love, and I think that is also showing your ability to be human. I'm scared of somebody. I'm scared of somebody who can get into a relationship and be sexually connected to somebody and just walk away like nothing happened. I'm scared of them type of people. I just don't get it. I don't. It is not a life that I wanna live. It is not a life and alignment that I see fit in my life. Um, yeah, that's tough, man. Like, you shared, especially for women, man, one of the core things that are experienced in relationships, and possibly one of those, like, last things, right? Especially for women, there's this, men move with sex differently than women. That's not to say one is better or right than the other. This is just, like, the makeup of men and women, right? Like, so men are productive creatures, yes. Women are receivers, all the things. So, but what's interesting, man, is for a woman, like, at the core, her giving up the center of her body, that is that is a big deal. That is a big deal. Like, that isn't something that we just do. Or at least I think from a perspective of that, something you just do randomly, right? Like, That's a big deal. That's a big trust factor for a woman to be able to say, I am safe enough to experience you in this form of closeness, um, to literally allow you to be inside of me. Okay, let's just speak plainly. Like that's a big deal, right? And so there's a lot of different, and we understand from that level and layer too that, those relations aren't just what we do and experience on the surface level. And so there's a lot going on there. There's a lot going on there. And I do believe it or not, man, I think there are a lot of men, yeah, it should be. Absolutely, Jazz. Absolutely, it should be, right? Um, but you also have to consider too, there are men who feel similar. There are men who feel similar. There are men who understand the weight of that kind of encounter, and who understand the importance of that and want to steward that. And I think a healed man fits in that category. And a man who is looking at that and says, "This is just another check off my list," that's a hurting man. That's a hurting, dysfunctional man. And that is not somebody that we're just trying to operate in. And I think we're in a culture where some of that stuff is so desensitized and normal, we don't look at that and question it. We're just like, it's just another thing. It's like, ooh, no, slow down for a second. Let's come back to the present moment. Is that really normal? No. There's a lot of behaviors that are happening out here that aren't normal behavior, but because we've seen it so often, we just treat it as normal behavior. That's that's not normal. That's not normal. Um, you know, and I think that's interesting. I think, well, and I would say like this, it's normal in the sense of it's what we see regularly. It's not normal in the sense of what it's designed to be. I'll say it like that. I'll say it like that. And I think these are also good spaces to have conversations too. And I'm not saying this is what this conversation is turning into. Um, like this also opens up the window, y'all. Like, because I think especially as people who are absolutely, Erica, yeah. And I think you want to be, these are where conversations just are helpful in these spaces, right? Um, this also opens up the door for conversations on, engagement of sex and all the things. Um, I think that's something that I think, especially as I've grown up in church and just my background from where I came from, and all the things like that's just stuff that wasn't talked about and wasn't talked about in a healthy way. And so a lot of people, especially as believers, we're just out here trying to fend for ourselves. And in one way or another, there's a belief, there's like two extremes, right? Like if I wait till marriage, then that means my marriage is going to be golden. And if I wait, and then there's like, okay, well, then there's this fear of, okay, well, what if I wait until marriage, don't know what I'm doing, and this is something that easily ruins the entirety of the relationship and intimacy that can be built. So then there's this other aspect to it where it's like, I don't know if it's in my best interest to wait. I probably want to figure everything out and engage in this, right? So that way I know what I'm doing, and that's for both parties. But I think, man, when we open up this door, it's gonna get deep. It's gonna get deep. And it's probably a lot different than maybe where we're all used to hearing. But I'm definitely not against having those kind of conversations. You're talking to somebody who has made a decision, by the way, and this is just for me and my values. Like, I'm waiting. I've made the decision to wait. I've made the legitimate decision to be like, yo, I've waited. But here's the thing: majority of people haven't. And so having this conversation is really, really important because there's a lot of people who haven't. And you had experiences, all the things, and that's not to create shame. That's not to create shame. Like, that's just to have let's have the conversation, right? Because most people aren't in that boat. Most people, especially statistically, I'm pretty sure it's by the age of, last time I looked at some of the statistics, I believe it was like by the age of 18. um, I believe it was at least in the high 80 percentile, 80, maybe 90% of people have already had a sexual partner and a sexual encounter. And then by the time they get to 21, 22, 23, they've had two or three, you know? And so, like, that's a majority of the population. So, like, a majority of people ain't doing that. And that's no shame or no shade. And what's crazy is, I think the church has done a horrible job of navigating these kind of conversations because all they do is shame you, and they shame and guilt trip you into not doing And it's like, well, that ain't helpful either. That ain't helpful. Just to shame and guilt trip, no shot. That is not how we're going to carry this kind of conversation. Um, and I think there's a lot of different avenues to take with it, man. I think that can open up a door to just having honest conversations about not just abstinence, but sexual connections, activity. What do we do while we're waiting? How do we wait? What even if it's engaging in some of these connections, um, in the dating processes, what does that look like? You know, um, and there's a lot of thoughts to that. So perhaps that's something. Put a one in the chat if that's something that y'all would be interested in like a future live on, because I do want to be intentional with that. I do want to prepare comments and thoughts on that. Um, and I think that would be really helpful. So let me put a one in the chat if that's something you would look forward to. You would swing back around, um, and would listen in on, because I think that's a great conversation to have.